Can you feel it in the air? After Britain's right-wing Reform Party romped home in the local elections, there's been a vibe shift on the left, a collective relaxing of the left's communal sphincter, and I bet those dirty commies would love a communal sphincter. Hey guys, we're all making compost with the same pipe. It's as if the left have suddenly realised how out of touch they are, and maybe, just maybe, people on the right have a point about uncontrolled immigration and grooming gangs. The Observer newspaper published this glowing coverage on the front page. Blooming reform, the women who won it. It's incredible. Just a few weeks ago, the only mention reform would have had in the left-wing press is to decry them as literally Hitler. Now apparently, they're the feminist option to vote for. Although, it's worth remembering that some of the suffragettes did have some pretty spicy opinions that would definitely get them kicked out of an Islington book club in 2025. The Guardian says Farage is bringing a new dawn, just like Nelson Mandela and Joe Biden promised. And reform stances on issues like opposing the dumping of asylum seekers in their constituencies have been reported in a straightforward manner, focusing on the policies themselves rather than framing them as extreme, and showing that this is something supported by people of immigrant backgrounds too, like Reform's own Zia Yusuf, the politician formerly known as Cat Stevens. Britain's Prime Minister Keir Starmer, desperate to stem the flow of votes to Farage, has flip-flopped to condemning mass immigration.
Let me put it this way. Nations depend on rules, fair rules. Sometimes they're written down, often they're not. But either way, they give shape to our values, guide us towards our rights, of course, but also our responsibilities, the obligations we owe to each other. Now, in a diverse nation like ours, and I celebrate that, these rules become even more important. Without them, we risk becoming an island of strangers, not a nation that walks forward together. So when you have an immigration system that seems almost designed to permit abuse, that encourages some businesses to bring in lower-paid workers rather than invest in our young people, or simply one that is sold by politicians to the British people on an entirely false premise, then you're not championing growth, you're not championing justice, or however else people defend the status quo. You're actually contributing to the forces that are slowly pulling our country apart. So yes, I believe in this. I believe we need to reduce immigration significantly. That's why some of the policies in this white paper go back nearly 3 years. Why I told the Labour Party conference, taking back control is a Labour argument. And why, most importantly of all, inward migration is already falling with this government.
Even Nigel Farage is saying, steady on chap, and comparing Starmer to Enoch Powell.
Nigel Farage thinks it was a big mistake, he says, for the Prime Minister to echo the language of Enoch Powell. He talks about how it was a strategic mistake, and he told me the use of that language was not in Keir Starmer's interest. It's a catastrophic mistake that will divide the left for years to come.
Although Enoch Powell's comments were actually widely misinterpreted and he was unfairly demonised, but that's a story for another video. So Keir Starmer's words are drifting towards common sense, but it's worth remembering that he's hugely increased illegal immigration by removing the Rwanda offshore processing policy, which was the only deterrent we had apart from British weather, and he's removed age checks on migrants that stopped adult migrants being placed in classrooms by pretending to be 14. So maybe we should wait to see some concrete results before we celebrate. But loads of lefties were outraged, saying that immigrants built Britain. I mean, it was nice of the immigrants to build Britain before they built their own countries, but most people seem unconvinced that Stonehenge was actually built by Somalians. Yvette Cooper defended Starmer. These are people who'd call you racist for saying the same thing last week. Enoch wasn't the only Powell making problems for Labour this week. One of the most telling moments in the vibe shift was the response to Labour MP Lucy Powell, the leader of the House of Commons, responding to a question about grooming gangs.
I don't know whether you saw the documentary on Channel 4 about rape gangs over this.
We want to blow that little trumpet now, do we? Yeah, okay.
There was a real issue
Let's get that dog whistle out, shall we?
Okay, Lucy.
A trumpet? I mean, I get the dog whistle reference, but who's got a racism trumpet? And more importantly, where can I buy one? Lucy's comments were disgustingly dismissive of the tens of thousands of victims, but I can't really blame Lucy for saying this. This has been the standard way for the left to deal with the issue of grooming gangs to make it go away, by calling anyone who mentions it racist. The difference now is that the criticism of Lucy came from the left. Ava Santina, do you remember her? She's a lefty commentator who climbed into the spotlight when a mate of mine said he didn't want to shag her, which I don't believe. I mean, if men were only attracted to people with the same political opinions as themselves, I'd have a fetish for bald, middle-aged men from Essex. But Ava is representative of a swathe of young, educated, professional women who up until now have been staunch lefties, because caring for the unwashed masses who want to come to Britain is the nice thing to do. But Ava's response to Lucy Powell's grooming gang comments was, "I have my head in my hands. Little girls will suffer for the rest of their lives, and we're suggesting that's a dog whistle. Does anything mean anything anymore?" The reality of mass immigration is finally overtaking the utopian dreams of people on the left. It took a while, but finally women on the left are starting to realise that the grooming gang epidemic isn't a fiction, they're real and they're horrific. And this came a week after Kirstie Allsopp, the nice posh English TV presenter, tweeted her concern at mass immigration fueling crime. We're seeing the gradual awakening of girl bosses and Mumsnetters to the horrors of open borders neo-communist anarcho-tyranny. And when the ladies get activated, stuff happens. Look at how the gender woo-woo cult imploded once lefty women like J.K. Rowling stopped indulging the polite fiction of trans ideology. Everyone on the left used to insist that we go along with the delusions of men who pretend they're women because it's the nice thing to do. And who doesn't want to be nice? A woman is anyone who says they're a woman. Anyone who doesn't agree is a far-right bigot. Then it became apparent that this was just creating a mechanism for men to barge into women's spaces. Lesbians were forced to allow men into their clubs. Women were pushed out of women's sports to make space for big hulking blokes who could injure them. And vulnerable kids were railroaded into a horrifying mass medical experiment involving hormones, sterilisation and surgery. The next polite fiction to fall could well be multiculturalism, the idea that all cultures are equal and society is improved by having lots of different cultures side by side. I mean, it didn't work in Lebanon. People have always secretly thought that multiculturalism is a mistake.
Is the result, is multiculturalism working? Here is what you told us. 5% of those of you who voted said yes it is. 95% of those of you who voted this morning said no it isn't.
And no wonder, because all cultures aren't actually equal. And I know that a lot of university professors will disagree with me, but I think that the culture that gave birth to Western civilization is better than the culture that gave birth to publicly stoning women to death. Some feminists may even agree, and it echoes their stance on the gender woo-woo. We've seen feminists say that if anyone can be a woman, then nobody is a woman. And they're now saying that if anyone can be English, then nobody is English. And another polite fiction that's due a reappraisal is anti-white racism. We've had years and years of open genocidal racism against white people. The public sector employees who rule over us are sent on courses to abolish whiteness. White people are arrested for saying it's okay to be white, which is apparently a hate crime. Think how mad it is to see it's okay to be white as hateful. Apparently this slogan was actually generated by people on the right who were testing to see what the most innocuous statement they could make that would still be condemned as a hate crime by the lefty establishment. Just as the right-wing trolls predicted, it's okay to be white was officially recorded as a hate speech slogan. Meanwhile, academics were celebrated for saying white lives don't matter. Nobody, apart from a few off-grid autists like me, said anything, of course, because you could still get in enormous trouble for not paying lip service to this fashionable racism. Nobody wants to be the first person to step out onto the minefield, but a collective fatigue has worked its way through Western people. We see the silliness of it all, like this Canadian police officer doing an Indigenous land acknowledgement when they're announcing missing kids, which should really take priority.
Good afternoon. I am Corporal Carly McCann, Provincial Public Information Officer for the Nova Scotia RCMP. Thank you all for being here today. Bonjour, je suis la caporale Carly McCann, agent d'information publique pour la GRC en Nouvelle-Écosse. Merci de votre présence aujourd'hui. First, I acknowledge that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the traditional and unceded ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. I also recognize that African Nova Scotians are a distinct people whose histories, legacies, and contributions have enriched that part of Mi'kma'ki known as Nova Scotia for over 400 years.
And with so many people now independently bored of wokeism, we have the perfect conditions for a preference cascade. A preference cascade happens when lots of people suddenly realise that lots of other people have the same opinion as them and suddenly feel emboldened to voice their opinions out loud. An example is the fall of Catholicism in Ireland. For centuries, Ireland was effectively a Catholic theocracy. The church had huge power, everyone went to church, but people slowly became disgruntled with it and word of mouth spread, especially among women. An Irish relative of mine told me how the priest and his acolytes marched into her house and ordered her to have her newborn child baptised. And then one day, the rigid carapace of Catholicism suddenly caved in almost overnight. It's starting to happen with leftism. I can feel it in my gooch. We're seeing a move away from the utopian dreaming that results in a horrific reality and a return to reality-based opinions that will reassert civilization. Anyone can see that a high-tax, big state system is unsustainable, and feeding infinity immigrants into the Ponzi scheme of the British economy means that when it does collapse, we'll just have a divided Islamified country to deal with, as well as economic ruin. Anyway, I'm doing a video soon on abolishing whiteness. It's been tried in a few places, and despite what lefty propaganda will tell you, it didn't result in a harmonious utopia. And I've got another video coming on the Islamification of Britain, as Muslim police arrest a British man in Manchester for insulting Islam. Turns out we're a lot further down the slope towards balkanisation than I thought. So if you want to see those videos before everyone else and have input into the process of making them, you can join my community of the only sane people left in the West by signing up to my Patreon. There's a link below. Anyway, thanks for listening. I've been Leo Kiers. Bye. Bye bye.